Joining us now, Jim Bacon of Bacon's Rebellion. He's got a blog, Bacon's Rebellion. He's been all over this dark money trail from a group that is opposing Dominion Energy and opposing the pipelines. And where's all this money coming from? And Jim Bacon has done a little investigative expose on Bacon's Rebellion, trying to trace it to its embryonic roots. And he's with us now. Jim Bacon, Happy New Year, man. Good to have you.
Happy New Year, John. Great to be here.
All right, Jimbo, you want to read Jim's column, you can go to baconsrebellion.com, baconsrebellion.com. That's a little long, Jim. Like, I'm a newspaper guy like you. I belong to the 750-word school. Not 5,000 words, but I know you had to kind of detail it out. Share with our audience your dark money investigation on the people fighting these pipelines. Just lay it out.
Well, there's so much dark money sloshing around. It's hard to keep track of it all. I've been tracking down several streams of the dark money, and there's others yet to be documented and revealed. But I guess the piece that I wrote most recently was about how Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York and kind of climate warrior, has given a huge amount of money to the New York School of Law, and they've set up this organization called the State Energy and Environmental Impact Center. And their goal is to impact public policy at the state level, working through state attorneys general. And Mark Herring, Virginia's Attorney General, applied for money to hire an assistant attorney general to work on climate change issues. And according to a press release from this Impact Center, that money was awarded. Now, Herring's office has come back and said, well, we never got the money and we never spent it, but we never hired anybody. But the fact is they're very interested in hiring, using private money to hire someone that they couldn't get through the normal legislative appropriation process to follow their agenda, their climate change agenda.
Right.
So that's the first way. That's just one example of kind of how things work. I mean, none of this has gotten any attention at all. Would not be known by anybody were it not for the work of a fellow by the name of Chris Horner at the Competitive Enterprise Institute, who did a lot of FOI requests and dug this up. Mm-hmm. So that's just one example of money. I can give you more if you want.
Give us what's relevant to Virginia and the pipeline specifically. The Atlantic Coast Pipeline.
Well, okay, I'll give you another example. There is a newly created digital publication called Virginia Mercury.
Yes.
They have an editor and 3 or 4 reporters, and they give a huge amount of attention to the pipeline. Well, who is Virginia Mercury? Well, I mean, they're very, not only they give attention to the pipeline, they're very, very negative and very, very critical of Dominion. So where do these guys get their money? Well, they were set up by an organization called the Hopewell Fund. And who's the Hopewell Fund? Well, they're dedicated to all these progressive causes, but where's the Hopewell get their money? And the Hopewell is basically just kind of a transmission mechanism from somebody else to Virginia Mercury, and we don't know. We don't know who the money is behind Virginia Mercury. We don't know who paying for this, in effect, all this negative coverage, and everyone is, on the one hand, you've got Dominion, which is you like them or not like them, but they play by and they report all the they sponsor your show. At one time, they sponsored our blog, but that's all out in the open. Everybody knows it. We don't make any secret of it. They report all the money they give to campaign contributions. They report their lobbyists. They report everything. But then you have all these other people who are out there influencing public policy by other means, such as setting up their own publications, and we don't know anything about it. We don't know where the money comes from.
So what you're saying is, okay,
there's another example. Now this is kind of old and it may be a little bit outdated, but there was one of the Russian oligarch groups set up a company in Bermuda called the Klein Fund, and they pumped millions of dollars into that. Klein Fund, it's been documented, gave a whole lot of this money to a California foundation called the Sea Change Foundation. Well, that's also devoted to all these different environmental causes. And the Sea Change, and now, it's not like the only money the Sea Change get is from the Russians. I mean, they have lots of millionaires and billionaires from California who flood the thing with money, but Russian money is mixed in there, and the Sea Change has donated money to Virginia Organizing, which is a kind of a Virginia activist group that has also been very, very active in the campaign against the pipeline. So that has been documented to occur. That was several years ago. Whether those kind of transactions continue, nobody knows, because the reporting is so slow and so opaque that it's really, really hard to follow. But we get these trails and hints of trails, and this dark money is all over the place, and these liberal organizations and environmental groups are influencing the political process in ways that simply are very difficult to track.
Okay, so let me get this straight, Jim Bacon of Bacon's Rebellion with us now. So what you're saying is, in Virginia specifically, there's a blog, an editorial-based blog called Virginia Mercury, right?
Right.
And this was started by a group of journalists that were with other news organizations, right? Richmond Sun-Dispatch and others, I believe. And so what you're saying is, they have to pay people, and they get research, and they have a blog, and they have web costs, and they get their money from an organization called the Hopewell Fund, is one of their sponsors or one of their underwriters.
Yeah.
Which is perfectly legal. I mean, you have a blog and you want to get money from somebody, you can certainly do that. But if you're not transparent about it, then the fact becomes you don't really know what the legitimacy is, right? Like, I have sponsors on my show. Everybody knows who they are because I either live read the ads or the ads are on my website or they're when we go to news. So you know who my sponsors are, and I'm proud of my sponsors. But if you can't say who your sponsors are or who's underwriting you, then there's a question to, is this really legitimate? But it is legal. And so that's really the issue. It is legal. And so what you're saying is, where did this money from the Hopewell Fund come from? And is this really a legitimate editorial-based blog, or is it driven by an agenda that there's a financial interest in? Right? That's what you're basically saying.
I mean, I think the Virginia Mercury does good work. I mean, their journalism is as legitimate as my journalism. The difference is that everybody knows where my money is coming from, and no one knows where their money is coming from. I can tell you that a lot of people can criticize me, say, oh, well, Dominion's a sponsor, and therefore you dance to Dominion's tune. Well, I didn't. But but by being open about things, I expose myself to those charges. Well, Virginia's not Mercury. We have no idea whose tune Virginia Mercury conceivably could be dancing to. They're good professional journalists, and I don't want to impugn their integrity, but we just don't know. And there's all sorts of ways of influencing the public policy process through people setting up not-for-profit organizations have become kind of advocacy groups, and they do educational outreach, quote unquote, or like organize, demonstrations and protests. There's all sorts of ways of influencing the process and grabbing headlines and writing reports and studies and so on and so forth. And that part, there's a huge amount of money, dark money, sloshing around the system, and it's not documented, it's not reported, unless you go out and do this laborious research, and even then you don't get it all. Whereas conversely, Dominion has been super criticized for donating all this money to legislators. Well, okay, that's fine. You can criticize them if you want, but at least they're open about it and they're transparent about it. If Dominion gives money to a politician, they're giving money to a politician, and so you can judge the politician, you can judge Dominion accordingly. But a lot of this other stuff, no one just has any idea how it works. No transparency in the system.
It's about transparency now. there's a bunch of politicians now that are saying they're not going to take money from Dominion Energy. Dick Saslaw, the likely incoming Senate Democrat majority leader when 2020 convenes, if my analysis is correct, I don't think the Republicans can hold the Senate. Saslaw has not rejected it. But the thing about Dominion is when they contribute to campaigns, everything is transparent. And I think that's the point that you're making. As long as it's out there, and if you look at the editorial in the Roanoke Times the other day, which I talked about at the opening, let me tell you what the Roanoke Times said. Dominion Energy was recently named one of the most transparent companies in the country by the Washington-based Center for Public Accountability, which tracks how open companies are in donating to politicians, trade groups, and nonprofits. I don't know how you can get a better rating than that from the Roanoke Times, which is not particularly pro-pipeline. You know, my position here is all about the Atlantic Coast and the Mountain Valley Pipeline because, look, pipelines produce jobs, Jim Bacon, they produce energy, they produce ongoing jobs because manufacturing plants then can come to Virginia and North Carolina, my two constituencies, along the pipeline. They can start companies there. They can tap right into the energy. They create jobs in areas that may need them. And so it's an ongoing source of efficient fuel and jobs. How you could be against this is I can't see the logic in it because unless you're against all energy, because if you want to get the natural gas, if you don't do the pipeline, you got to put it on a train or a truck or a ship, which is even worse, and then a train and a truck, like Massachusetts when it came from Russia. I mean, for the life of me, I mean, I get the environment, but the pipelines are the safest way to transport the natural gas. So the opposition to this is dumbfounding to me, Jim Bacon.
Well, you know, I don't want to be in the position of explaining to the opposition on the radio. I mean, they do have their reasons, and some of them I think are legitimate. To me, it's more a matter of balance. I mean, all the things that you said were true. The pipeline will supply gas that can potentially supply new industry that will create jobs and wealth along the pipeline route. So that's clearly a major bonus, as well as the need to shift our power supply, our electric generating power supply, more towards natural gas and away from coal. Mm-hmm. And now the problem, the driving force, you have two groups of people who are opposed to the pipeline. One is the group of people who are directly in the pipeline path, and I can understand that. You know, you've got this, you live on a beautiful farm or have these woods around, right, and you got a pipeline cut through, and they, you lose right, your view shed, and okay, I get it. The other group is the environmentalists, and the reason they're opposed is because of their absolute opposition to climate change, and they're opposed to any kind of natural gas or fossil fuel being used anywhere, anytime. And that's the basis of their opposition to the pipeline. And you can't argue with those people because, I mean, the whole thing about climate change is almost like a religion. So,
right. And so they would rather have no electricity, no energy, just ride bicycles. I mean, that's basic because solar can't do it. Dominion Power is already committed to delivering 15% of their entire energy output in renewable energy, solar and wind, water, by 2025, and they're going to be way ahead of that. I mean, there's days right now, if the sun shines or the wind blows, they're up over 20% now. So, but they want the average to be 15%. The wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine, and so you can't get to 100. But they're making investments to get a balance there, which is the absolute right thing to do. And they're doing it without subsidies. They're doing it in a reliable, efficient way. That's why it's taking longer. I mean, look, anybody can do all solar, but then you got to subsidize it because it's cost prohibitive. Because when the sun doesn't shine, you have no power. I mean, so then there has to be the backup system in. So the whole thing is an asinine argument. And then you look at Dominion Energy's rates, and I'm talking off the top of my head, but they're something like 33% under the Mid-Atlantic area, the average of other people in the same region. They're 30% under, and they're 15% under national. So their rates, their service is great. Their rates are lower than anybody else in the region. Their rates are lower than anybody else in the country. They're diversifying to get 15% of total energy output in renewable energy, sun to wind and water, by 2025, and they're doing it in a way that's efficient. And the people who say, well, they should go all nuclear, well, it's not their decision. I mean, there's regulations for that. It's not France. So I don't know what the beef is here. For the life of me, I can't figure it out.
Well, the irony is a lot of a lot of environmental groups that want to shut down the pipeline also want to shut down the nuclear power plants, or at least not let them renew their licenses. So, I mean, they want to create basically kind of the German model for an electric grid, which is, this huge percentage of wind and solar power. Well, you can handle a certain up to what I've heard is in the Mid-Atlantic area, which is part of the PJM interconnection system, could handle up to about 30% renewable energy without threatening the reliability of the grid. You get much over that, and it gets to be a real problem, and you do start running the risk of blackouts and brownouts, particularly in the area.
Jim, I'm out of
maybe
time.
not,
Thank you.
Day-to-day risks, but you have another like polar vortex or something like that, which just overloads the system demand, and it's combined with a lot of cloudiness. And
hey,
so
Jim, I'm out of time, man. I got to go.
The sun's not
I got to get to the top of the
shining,
hour. Jim Bacon, Bacon's Rebellion. Go to baconsrebellion.com.